I'm Brie. Thanks for coming. It's your last presentation. You made it through the day. I was part of the public elementary cohort this year, and I did my internship in a third grade classroom in Newton. And I did my research focusing on my students' writing, in particular free writing or creative writing. I got the idea for this free writing program actually from one of our professors in our cohort who, as an assignment for our class, had us write in a journal anything we wanted 3 times a week. And the 4 of us in our cohort thought this was the greatest assignment ever. So I modified it and used it for my 3rd graders. My research question was, how does free writing influence my 3rd graders' attitudes towards writing? Because, you know, a lot of kids, they just don't like writing. It's not uncommon to see it in the classroom. So I wanted to know, was this going to make a difference? So this is what our free writing program looked like. I gave each student a journal, and we had 2 sessions per week for 10 minutes long. And the rule was you had to write for the entire time, pencil to paper. But you could write about anything you wanted. Now I'm talking everything from a list of what I want for my birthday, to a story about aliens and dinosaurs, to nonsense words. I mean, I told kids they could literally write strings of letters if they had nothing else to write, or just words, whatever came to their mind. It was really important to me to let them know not to worry about spelling or grammar, and not to erase anything. So if there was something they didn't like, they could cross it out, but I didn't want them to erase because I wanted them to always have a record of what they had thought. So the last thing I told them was that anything they wrote in their journals would be confidential. I was the only one that was going to read it, unless they wanted to share it with the rest of the class. And I only responded if they asked me to respond. So if they wanted me to respond to a particular entry, I asked them to draw a star next to it. So, what happened when we started doing this program? Those of you who have been around kids will probably not be surprised, know that they loved it. Every time I would say, okay, we're going to do a free write, I would hear, yes, oh yes. And, you know, when we hadn't done it for a couple days, kids would ask me, are we going to do free write today? They loved it, and even in the surveys I gave them at the end, I got that response from every single student. So this naturally led me to wonder, okay, so what is it about free writing that's making it such a positive experience? Obviously it's having an impact on their attitudes about writing, but why? What's happening? So I looked at my data. I started with the surveys that I had given my students before we started this program, in which I asked them questions about how they felt about writing, if they liked it or not, how they felt about themselves as writers. I gave final surveys at the end of the program that had similar questions and also some questions about if they liked the program that we did. And I also did some small group interviews, which asked a lot of the same questions as the final surveys. I did them at the end of the program, but in an oral format instead of written. So I took those and tried to get like a picture of what the whole class was thinking. I did some quantitative analysis and counted up answers to questions. And then I also had my students' journals. So I have photocopies of every single student's journal, and I went through. I looked for the genres that they wrote in, if they wrote poems, short stories. Some wrote nonfiction essays. Some of them wrote diary entries. I also looked at the topics they chose to write about. You know, things that we had been talked about in school, what I did with my mom last night, you know, anything. So I had all this data, and I'm trying to answer the question, why is free writing such a positive experience? And I came up with these 4 key themes that I want to talk to you in a little bit more detail about. But they're self-expression, creativity, relaxation, and confidence building. So self-expression, when I say self-expression, I'm talking about the students' ability to represent their feelings, their thoughts, their ideas, their personality in writing. So they had this opportunity in free writing, and 17 out of the 22 of them wrote about, at least once, some personal experience. Again, this was a whole range, but you know, they were able to infuse that into their writing. The fact that they could share what they wrote with me was really important to a lot of students, and I found that in their final surveys and interviews. I remember one particular student said, it's so cool because the teacher gets to see your stories and gets to learn more about who you really are. And it was true, I did learn a lot more about my students from reading their free write journals. They also really appreciated the fact that it was confidential. For a lot of them, this was a safe place for them to let out feelings or thoughts or things. I had one student who wrote about a friend who she felt like wasn't really her friend anymore. And that, you know, she was able to get that out in her journal. And in their final surveys, this is one example. This student wrote, I like free writing because I get to share my feeling and keep it to myself. So that, for him, that was really particularly important. Creativity was another theme that I found really, really prevalent in my students' writing. And every single student that I talked to in their final interview or survey talked about how much they loved the fact that they got to choose what they wrote about. I mean, this is huge for kids who don't often get to choose what they write about in school. 14 out of my 22 students wrote short stories at least once, and 15 out of the 22 wrote creative poems. And these were the two genres that I felt like were the most creative and showed the students developing these ideas on their own. And this is an example of one story, The Adventure of Space Bunny, that was, this student was a good student, he was a good writer, but, you know, never ever would I have been able to see that he had this idea for a story about a bunny in space who was playing video games and somebody broke through the ceiling. I mean, he developed this creative idea far beyond anything I ever could have seen elsewhere in school. Relaxation was an aspect of free writing that I hadn't really expected when I started it, but it became really, really important to the students. I made sure that whenever we were free writing, it was a quiet atmosphere, it was calm, there weren't students running around, you know, they could sit on the floor if they wanted to. I wanted them to be comfortable. Sometimes we listened to music, which a lot of the kids really, really liked. And the other thing was that there was no expectation placed on them. I wasn't going to grade this, I wasn't correcting their mistakes, I wasn't looking for a specific output from them. It was stress-free, and very few things in school are stress-free for students. So it was relaxing, it was calming. One student in her final survey wrote, "I think all classes should have free write because it refreshes your mind and it's fun." Keep in mind these are third graders, and for her to say that, you know, it must have been really important to her. So the last theme that I found was this confidence-building aspect of free writing. 11 out of my 22 students, after we did this, thought their writing had improved. Now, way back at the beginning, I had half the class that thought, yeah, I'm a good writer, and half the class thought, I'm okay. You know, nobody came right out and said no. But these 11 who thought their writing had improved came from both groups. So even the ones who thought they were good initially thought they improved, and some of the ones who thought they were just okay initially improved. 20 out of the 22, so almost all of them, completed at least one piece of writing. So that's a big deal. You complete a piece of writing, you feel proud of it, you feel like you're a successful writer. The other thing was that I gave them really positive, encouraging responses. So usually when you hand in a piece of writing to the teacher, you get it back with red pen all over it, and you fix your mistakes and all that stuff. In this situation, they were handing me their writing, and I was writing back my thoughts about it. Oh, this is so cool. I can't wait to see what's going to happen next. I can't wait to read more of your writing. That was the kind of thing that I was giving back to them. So this story was a girl who wrote a story about a child who found magic flip-flops. When she put them on, they would take her anywhere in the world. And if you look at the story, I mean, if you receive this as a formal piece of writing, there's tons of things that the student needs to work on. Spelling, capitalization, sentence structure, I mean, the list goes on and on. But that wasn't the feedback I was giving her. I was giving her, I can't wait to see what's going to happen next in the story. So I have these 4 themes, and I found them pretty prevalent across the board in my classroom, but I want to share the story of one particular student with you, Jenny. Jenny is a student who reads at a 1st grade level. She really, really struggles with writing. She's on an individual education plan. Writing mechanics are so difficult for her. She has to sound out every single word as she writes it, and usually in school that really diminishes the output that she's able to get in her writing. Jenny loved free writing. I mean, loved it. She wrote stories upon stories, she wrote poems. So I want to read to you one of her stories. Pretty hard to decipher, but having been her teacher for a couple months before I started this, I sort of knew her spelling patterns. So the story goes, a puppy got stuck in a sewer. He could not get out. Then a little boy walked by the sewer. He heard something. He went home to get a rope that he could go down. So he came back with some rope, and he went down. He saw a little puppy. He was skinny, so he brought him home and fed him, and he was eating really fast. He was so happy he started to run around. And then I named him Spork. The end. So this is a completed piece of writing. It's a story. It has a beginning, middle, and end. And it's, you know, it's kind of good. And Jenny never, ever, ever would have been able to write this had she not had this opportunity for free writing. So in her free writing experience, she wrote these stories with cohesive plots, with developed characters. Her stories were usually about children and animals and some kind of heroic rescue. She also had this positive interaction with her teacher about writing. She had a lot of one-on-one time with teachers during the day, but it was usually in the context of, Jenny can't complete this work on her own. But in this situation, she was doing academic work, writing, and she was having this great interaction with me where she felt good about it. She also said, in other writing in school, you have to stop and talk or listen to the teacher, but like in free write, it's quiet and you can just sit and just write, and it's a time to relax. So she was one student who the school day was really demanding for her, really stressful. So she really valued this time. In her final interview, she said to me, I think I'm a really good writer. And I was like on the ground crying. I was so happy. So I had all these students like Jenny who were having this amazing experience. So when I turned to the literature to see what other researchers had done with free writing, I was looking for where can I go from here. And I found that I read 3 articles by teacher researchers who successfully linked free writing to their formal writing programs. These 3 teachers, Nancy Redke, Jack Schwartz, and Margaret Niederer. And I found that they did it in 3 kinds of ways. The first was that they would build on students' creative content. So they took these creative stories like Space Bunny or The Puppy and let students revise, edit them, expand them in formal writers' workshop programs. They also built on students' confidence. They really stressed how important it was to continue to encourage the students and let them know, you are a good writer. I've seen you write well in your free writing journal. You can do this. And they talked about building on students' enjoyment. You know, if we can foster a love for writing as teachers, we must do everything we can to make sure that continues. I mean, that's our ultimate goal, right? And I want to share this one particular quote by Nancy Redke, who used free writing in her classroom, and she said, for years we've had free reading. Why not free writing? I mean, I know every single teacher I know uses free reading. Kids get to choose their book, they get to practice reading, and they feel good about it. It's the same exact thing for free writing. And she was saying this back in 1964, so what are we waiting for? So, summing up, my students really enjoyed free write. It really improved their attitudes towards writing. I had these 4 key components that made it successful. They were able to express themselves, to build on their creative ideas. It was a relaxing, stress-free environment for them, and they built their confidence as writers. And going forward for me, my goal is going to be to link this free writing experience to students' formal writing, using some of the ways that I read about and exploring other ways that I'm going to be able to do that. And I'll end with the quote that my title came from, which I think sums up sort of what I wanted from my what I wanted my students to get out of this experience, and this is from one student. She said, it's like we're real writers, because you know, real writers write because they like to do it, and they write about their own ideas, and we're doing that too.